Happy Poetry Month. April is global and National Poetry Month, and I'm so excited to be with you today because, as you know, for those of you who are following my work, we are looking to build brain capital, which are brain skills and brain health, with the arts, right? That holistic journey that we're all on of trying to make sense of the world, trying to make sense of ourselves and the brain, and how do the arts play a critical role in that journey? Since it's Poetry Month, we'll be looking at how poetry plays a big effect in our role as leaders, our role within our relationships, and more importantly, our role with ourselves. And of course, we are also looking to advocate the arts within the sciences, the arts within leadership, the arts within business and corporate. And what does it look like to really take the arts seriously as a part of the training so we can have the best leaders who are cognitively flexible and functioning and adaptable and resilient and regenerative and able to be curious and creative in this future of work. Because it's Poetry Month and we're looking at blending the arts and the sciences and business and leadership all together, we have a wonderful guest with us. This isn't really a podcast or even a Diamond Mentor moment, but this is just a wonderful celebration of poetry and its place in our life. We have a wonderful guest with us by the name of Joseph Jefferson. Full name is Albert Joseph Jefferson IV, but Joseph Jefferson, who is a JPL NASA flight in engineer, but he controls a spacecraft and he really has a background in math and a background in just the hard sciences. Some of them I can't probably even pronounce. And he is also related to me as well in my family. And let's bring him to the stage. Welcome, Joseph.
Hey, how are you?
I am wonderful. Thank you for opening this month of celebrating poetry and the art of poems. We'll be looking at the neuroscience of poetry and then how you and your organization of scientists and mathematicians and physicists and everyone else, the is of your organization, why you think it is important. So actually, since we're talking about poetry, what has been your personal journey with poetry, especially coming from your hard science background?
Yeah, well, I love poetry, and to me, poetry is a expression, a very personal expression in rhythm, in rhyme, which is rhythms of frequencies, if you want to make it scientific. But it's something that is very personal, something that's very stylistic to you, and you express who you are through it. And so for me, it's always been something how I could express the connections between sciences and the arts in an artful way. And I love to see how poetry kind of springs up in every single person and the topics and expressions of life that come with that. But yeah, I would say definitely a self-expression. And for me, that happens to be the connections between science and art.
Yeah, there's so much there, and that's like a small piece of the pie, right? And even as we were growing up, because we grew up in the same household, my twin sister, your older sister, Janae Jefferson used to win, or Janae Babb now, right? Win poetry contests, and she wrote The Adventures of a Jump Rope, and I used to write poems for my teachers. I think they're called acrostic poems, when you would put the letter of their name. So if the last name was Jones, the first line would start with J, and then the second portion would start with O. I did that for Mr. Rayler and even the man who birthed my son, who the first hands that my son, I wrote him a poem.
Oh, that's sweet. I didn't know that.
Dr. Frederick Cohn over at Tarzana, California, near you. Wow. And you're right. It's just kind of like, especially when in a big or emotional transitional experience, like, childbirth or getting married or something like that, to resort to that. I heard Michael Jordan. I heard a story about Michael Jordan during his during his documentary when they were going to disband the winning, crew team of the Chicago Bulls after they won their
Mhm.
sixth. Um, and they all sat around and he wrote a poem. And I remember the other
Wow.
basketball players saying, "There's these men who are just won the basketball championship, like the biggest thing in the world, right? And we
Yeah.
all have to deal with leaving one another. And this man, who's
Mhm.
probably the top of his game among the whole field, right, of all times,
Mhm.
he
Yeah.
writes a poem." And
The
I
great
actually,
unifier. I love
yeah,
it. I
I
love
have
it.
to clip that because it's so powerful, and I probably should have clipped it to show now. But
Mhm.
yeah, so talk about poetry and science. Like, why does NASA have a on-site poet?
Yeah. So I believe that poetry is one of the chief ways to communicate efficiently and effectively. You think about the civil rights era, for instance. We could hear lectures. I think we just may have lost you there, Janine. Make sure you're
Nope.
still there.
I'm
Okay, you're
here.
still there. Okay, great. We can hear lectures from Harvard and Cambridge about or debates, between James Baldwin and people on the other side. But what really struck the heart of America was the "I Have a Dream" speech. And in that, to me, it was really poetry. You have the "I Have a Dream" motif, and he would become very rhythmic in his style. And that really is what poetry is. It's a verse that has rhythm and structure. And there's something about that, especially with words that matter,
Mm,
that grip the hearts of people. And with science, we have sometimes a difficulty communicating these very difficult subjects that take years and years and years to master to the public who really loves this and wants to know about the universe around them.
mhm,
But an effective way is oftentimes poetry. It's
mm,
something that is very attainable and accessible. And when you artfully put in substance and things that matter to their lives in a structure like that, it tends to be effective. And so that's
yeah.
why I believe, NASA is really keen on that.
Mm. And I love how you say it's a great unifier. It doesn't matter if you have 16 PhDs, which in your world, you have a
Exactly.
lot of people that have
Yeah.
just stacked
Yes.
credentials and degrees, or if you barely finished the 10th grade, there is something equalizing about just producing a poem, a simple poem. Some of the greatest
There
poems
is.
who were like, wow, like some of their best poems are like 5 sentences, right?
There's a reason why we call it the universe. It's the
Mm,
universe. It's a
mhm.
verse, right? It's this
Ooh.
one word, right? And it's the unification of all verses. That's the way
Mm.
I think of it. Um, and the university, it's this unification of verses to bring us all together into all these different types and perspectives of the way we see life, bringing it all together as one.
That's
That's how I think of it. But
why I love
mhm.
talking to you because you just take me on a whole nother level. So let's share a poem from NASA, and then we're gonna share one that you shared with the family this morning. I
Yeah,
don't even know if you knew it was Poetry Month or if you just shared it because.
yeah. I
Um,
share it because, but
okay, well, perfect timing. And
exactly.
then let's share. I don't know if you have some of your work available, and then
Yeah,
hopefully we can share this video and have people share their poems. I'll be sharing
I
some of
love
the
it.
poems that I've done throughout the years as we continue sharing. But you were a part of an event called Blending Science and Art. Could you explain about that, and then we'll get into the poetry part of that event.
Yeah. So yeah, the Getty Museum and Caltech and other scientific organizations kind of came together to do something called Blended Worlds, which is a part of an effort called the Pacific Standard Time.
Mhm.
And this year happened to be the sciences and the arts coming together. And so there were a variety of different exhibits happening. There's one still going on right now at LACMA. But we did an event at the Alex Theater in Glendale, which had a bunch of different artists and scientists giving talks, and doing it either your science talk in an artful way or an art expression in a scientific way. But and somehow blending these two very different worlds, which many people see as separate, and showing that they are actually very connected. Um, and so I was there to talk about Voyager, which I'm the lead attitude control engineer for. And we also had a musical, which I was in, that we did a performance of a song in too. But it was really a great event, and a lot of different talks that were just fantastic and fascinating.
Ah, wonderful. So I hope people go check that out, Blended Worlds, and we could maybe put the link somewhere if when I do the show notes, right? They always say that.
Yeah.
And that is amazing. So there was a woman, because I watched the lectures, it's like what, 2 hours long or something, or 3 hours long. But I watched the lectures just because I love to learn about what's going on in neuroscience, building a brain capital, but also the arts and leadership and business. And you had a wonderful colleague at the event talk about water and ice and how they're looking at using their understanding of water and ice to see if there's other worlds out in other universes. I don't even. Do you want to explain a little bit of that?
Yeah. And so, the wonderful thing about the universe that we live in is there are only so many elements it's comprised of, and so the elemental building blocks. We had a conversation about this, about how elementary, is a word play on elements, which is the fundamental building blocks of us, is very widespread throughout the universe. We see hydrogen and oxygen atoms everywhere. Hydrogen is the most abundant molecule in the universe, and it happens to be one of the parts of water. This is my dog Rocket, and he's going to come and say hi. Great timing, Rocket, because he's mostly water as well. But but yes, hydrogen is H2O, and we utilize the properties of water, especially how light interacts with water, to find other planets that have water. And water is important to us because we know that it is a fundamental part of life. And one of NASA's aims is to try to find life in other worlds, or to see if life can come from other worlds, or if we can go to other worlds and live there and successfully. And so that's what she was kind of talking about, but she did it in a much more artfully beautiful way, because that's her field. And her name is Morgan Cable. She's a fantastic scientist.
Well, let's check her out. And then your poet Lucoriot, your poet on site wrote a poem about the mission, and I love that. And let's check it out.
Reflect on this amazing opportunity to try to answer this question of if we're really alone. And let's listen to Ada read these words, her tribute to the Europa Clipper mission.
In praise of mystery, a poem for Europa. Arching under the night sky, inky with black expansiveness, we point to the planets we know. We pin quick wishes on stars. From Earth, we read the sky as if it is an unerring book of the universe, expert and evident. Still, there are mysteries below our sky. The whale song, the songbird singing its call in the bough of a wind-shaken tree. We are creatures of constant awe, curious at beauty, at leaf and blossom, at grief and pleasure, sun and shadow. And it is not darkness that unites us, not the cold distance of space, but the offering of water, each drop of rain, each rivulet, each pulse, each vein. Oh, second moon, we too are made of water, of vast and beckoning seas. We too are made of wonders, of great and ordinary loves, of small invisible worlds, of a need to call out through the dark.
Art and science is baked into the DNA of JPL right from the core.
I think it's super important for scientists to connect their work to people, and creative outlets help us do that.
I'm firmly convinced that art is a teacher, it's not an object.
We purposely try and be bold, pushing the boundaries of what's possible.
All right. How amazing
Right.
was
Beautiful.
that? Okay, there we go. So, thoughts?
You know, so with water, a lot of people don't know that the water that is in us is older than the sun, right? We think that the water that is in us and on Earth came from a comet that came to the solar system before the solar system existed and was the solar system. Um, and so art was formed before the sun was created. So when it came to the solar system, the water that was on that comet that came to the Earth actually was created before the sun even existed. And so I tell people, that intuition you have, trust it, because the water in you is literally ancient in ways that we can't even probably comprehend.
Yeah.
And so that poem just reminded me of that, of just this life-giving force in all of us that is required for all life to exist, that is so abundant in the earth, and that we search for in other worlds too because of its mystical, magical powers, but also uniquely scientific and things that we can explain.
Yes, yes.
Yeah.
And it makes you shift perspectives. We do a lot of work with perspective shifting, pulling from some of the work with Dr. Michael Platt. He talks about the importance of shifting perspective. But even with your science, I shared with you this TED Talk that hopefully you'll be able to watch. Dr. Michelle Reedman McLaurin, where she does a lot of research with countries that are developing, and in Papua New Guinea. Just countries where they may be experiencing extreme poverty, and women still have there's huge issues with childbirth and
Wow.
infant mortality rate and things like that. And the data's data. She showed a graph. Here's what's going on, but then she wrote a poem about it. So she started making sense of her research for her own journey through poetry. So I hope people can check this out. Can poetry make us healthy? This was a wonderful TED Talk I saw. And just, talking about the brain, what do you think poetry does for our brain as far as the brain health part of brain capital? How does it keep us healthy and sane for most of us?
I think it's just literally working out those creative centers and doing it and your synapses are all about connecting, right? It's all about making connections and neural connections. Everything about life, I believe, also has to do with connecting. And, when you make poetry, by creatively working out these connections that you have in your own life, I believe you're creatively working out your brain in general. Your brain, just like you go to the gym to make your muscles stronger, you got to come to the gym of life and express in ways that make your brain work a little harder to create and do that work. I think it makes your brain stronger personally.
It does. And so could you bring out the poem you shared from the other poet, Rumi, I believe his name was? Let me bring
and language.
Wait 1 second. All right.
Yeah, so Rumi, he's a Persian poet from the 1200s, and he had a very large Western following recently. but his poetry is beautiful. So I was happening to read a book of his poems, and this one just really stuck out to me because I think it was so beautiful and a great way to live. But it's called "The Body is Like a Pot with the Lid on. Lift the lid to see if it is filled with the water of life or the poison of death. Focus on the contents and you will become a master. Focus on the pot and you will be misguided. Your eyes only see the body while the spiritual eye perceives the soul." It's just incredibly deep and very simple at the same time. You know, it's almost so obvious, but in a world that is so dominated by vanity and dominated by what you look like on the outside or what things you may hold or degrees you may hold, all these things, we forget about what's more important is what the pot actually holds.
Yeah.
And you know, it makes me think about Stevie Wonder and how he says that he can pretty much quickly know if a person is good or not because his blindness makes it so he sees the soul first and not the person's body. So he can hear the vibrations if they're lying or not, if they're real. He can hear their intentions, and he uses that intuition to quickly say, "I don't want you in my life," or "I do want you in my life."
That's
And I
so
think,
good.
yeah, and it just changes the playing, it changes your level. I think in this game of life, if you see people for who they are inside, and you don't rush to judge a book by its cover, but you really listen and you learn about somebody from who they are inside and care about the outside later, it's a lot better than caring about the outside first and then learning who they are inside later, you know.
And it's that inside. Someone else said a great quote that said, when we finally realized it's the invisible that's the most essential.
Exactly.
I was like, oh, that's so good. And you know, musically speaking, sometimes we have people close their eyes because your eyes can sometimes if all your senses work, your vision kind of dominates, you know. But when you close your eyes, you force your body to relegate to the other senses, and you can, you know, the voice carries so much information, right? About position, intent.
Yeah.
And that's why we believe in lyrics and leadership, and all of our other stuff is, go take some theater classes, learn prosody, which is the inflections of your voice. That's why I'm teaching my son, like prosody and expression and the tonal pitches. It matters, but it matters in poetry. I love how you said poetry is musical, right?
It is.
Awesome.
And because music, at least from the vocal standpoint, but even in an instrumental standpoint, is poetry, you know. So lyrics are poetry. You look at a lyric, and without the music, you just read it. It reads like a poem, you know, and that isn't by mistake.
And with that, I'm going to share a poem, and then before you share your poem, and you know, we are doing the Lyrics and Leadership Institute. We are starting a school. Someone said, "I love
it."
I'm not starting a school when I was teaching in the class because I had a traditional school in my mind. I'm not starting school, and then here I am starting an institute. Leadership skills, brain health skills, brain capital, but inspired through the works of musical art artists or iconic art artists. And I was interviewing and talking to one of Prince's crew, his musical director, Morris Hayes, and he had a deep conversation with Prince. They had many conversations, and Morris asked him, you know, you could play like 20 different instruments and do all these things. You're very versatile. Everyone knew that. But he said, you know, what really resonates you? Like, who do you like? What one thing do you just love? Like, you are it. And Prince looked at him and he said, I'm a poet. I'm a songwriter. The poetry moves him. Like, he was like, before anything else. And that rocked me. I was like, yes, I can use that to teach poetry, you know, because the whole thing is, you know, how do we get inspired to grow this area of our life, inspired by a musical artist. So yeah, Prince said, so his own words, first and foremost, I see myself as a
master.
So with that, I'm going to share my poem in celebration of National Poetry.
Yay!
My husband and I were walking around Japan and South Korea, but in Japan, I just brought my camera out and I started taking pictures of flowers. And so I'm going to just do something with it. But I took this picture of this purple flower, as you see, and it's raining, right? It was drizzling that day. And this is before I knew I was going to do anything with iconic artists, definitely before I was going to do anything with Prince. You know, I knew of his work and saw him once, but I wasn't like a diehard fan or anything. But yeah, I just took this picture, and then later on, I wrote a poem called Purple Rain. So here it is. Purple rain, sprouting together despite the pain. I see you and you see me, united as one, visions of what can be. Like the dew, you're here, steady through it all. Like the rain you nurture, maintaining through the fall. There are no reds, there are no blues. We're mixing our wisdom so no one can lose. Purple rain, I feel you dancing in the purple rain.
Yes. Oh my gosh. Amazing, Janine.
Oh, yeah.
That's gorgeous. I love it. Wow. Wow.
So the
wow,
goal
wow.
was to take all the pictures of the flowers that I took, and some are roses and reds, and just create a poem from it and just call it the
Beautiful.
poetry flowers of Asia or something. I don't know.
Yeah, that was great. I loved it. That was
thank
wonderful.
you.
Yes.
Yes.
The red and the blues mixing, the wisdom,
Yeah.
and the fall.
Definitely
and
need it
the
right
raining,
now.
the seasons. Yes. That was wonderful. Great job.
Awesome. So before we get to your poem, I want something you said reminded me of this clip about everyone having the right to to exercise that poetry muscle, right? To know it's a part of them, just like breathing and writing and everything.
Yes.
And our contribution to, you said the verse, the universe, right?
Mhm.
And what is your contribution to the universe?
And language.
No matter what anybody tells you, words and ideas can change the world. Now, see that look in Mr. Pitt's eye? Like 19th century literature has nothing to do with going to business school or medical school, right? Maybe. Mr. Hopkins, you may agree with them, thinking, yes, we should simply study our Mr. Pritchard and learn our rhyme and meter and go quietly about the business of achieving other ambitions. I have a little secret for you. Huddle up. Huddle up! We don't read and write poetry because it's cute. We read and write poetry because we are members of the human race. And the human race is filled with passion. Medicine, law, business, engineering, these are noble pursuits and necessary to sustain life. But poetry, beauty, romance, love, these are what we stay alive for. To quote from Whitman, "Oh me, oh life of the questions of these recurring, of the endless trains of the faithless, of cities filled with the foolish, what good amid these, oh me, oh life? Answer, that you are here, that life exists and identity, that the powerful play goes on and you may contribute a verse. That the powerful play goes on and you may contribute a verse. What will your verse be?
What will your verse be?
Rest in peace, the great Robin Williams.
Yes. So what will your verse
Wow.
be? So with that,
Wow.
Joseph, what will your verse be? Do you please share your poem?
I have a couple poems I think I want to share. First one's shorter. It's called Eternity. I wrote it after learning a little bit more about the theory of relativity from Albert Einstein. and the consequences of moving at the speed of light, and what that means for all of us, since we all radiate light from our skin. We all radiate infrared wavelengths of light. So if I had an infrared camera right now, you'd be glowing. That's why when someone's pregnant, you're glowing. They really mean that. It's real, right?
They're all
So I
glowing.
say we're stars walking around because we really are. You know, when you are alive and you have heat inside of you, you're going to radiate light, and you exchange that light energy with each other, and we accept it and we radiate it out. And so
Pause there for really quick. There's a scripture that I love that says the human soul is the candle of God. Something like that. So, okay.
Love. Yes, exactly. So it's called eternity. They tell me eternity is not real. But when I feel at the speed of light, all time ceases to exist. Now, when I look at the sun, the stars, your skin, eternity enters me. A stillness within a lifetime, an ocean within a seed. It's really short, but it's just the idea that light itself. So when you think about light physically in physics, light doesn't have time. It doesn't experience time like we do. The closer you move to the speed of light, the slower time goes for you. And when you go the speed of light, it literally time stops. And so in a way, you can think that you experience everything all at once. Like that a movie called Everything All at Once. That's where that comes from. And so when you think of light coming from the sun and it gets into your eye, that perfect ray of light that no one else experiences but you, that light, from its perspective, literally is experiencing everything now at all time for all of time. Mm-hmm. And so I just kind of took that idea and thinking that, that light is also coming from you and I. Mm-hmm. And so in a way, we experience that too, even though ourselves are stuck in our own little gel blocks of our unique perspective of time, because it's different for everyone else. But the light coming out of us is timeless.
See that, and that's beautiful, the way that you can take the scientific aspect, because light's very complex, and I look at it from Dr. Rabbi Trugman has a book called The Mystical Elements of Light or something. So he attaches it to his Hebraic understanding as well. But also he adds the science into it, but then to present it in a poetry form, that's a wonderful bridge, right?
Yeah, and I that's kind of my thing. I think is unifying science and the arts. But this one's a little bit different. So this one I went on a hike with my dog, the Rocket, and we sat out on this tree that fell off, and it made a perfect bench, and it was just one of the most beautiful images I've ever seen. And it was during Thanksgiving, and it made me think of the seasons. And it's called Blue Jay. At morning light or winter's bench, take the time to reminisce how blue jays fly a summer's length, not far behind where sonnet waits. I feel the bait, I hear the call, the 3-bar songs giving fall. Then up it springs, strong, fit and tall, on sandy links and grassy knolls. The seasoning, aging all, Thanksgiving brings in tempered souls. And away it goes to other worlds, the stepping stones and godly pearls, the ancient swirls, the nests in oak, where wind will blow and guide us home. It's called Blue Jay. And I saw a blue jay flying, and I was like, oh, I gotta write a poem about a blue jay. Oh my gosh.
That's wonderful. Yeah, Rabbi Trugman posted a poem he wrote. Like, I was just walking, it just came out. So did yours just come out?
Yeah.
Home and gotta
and and also I was thinking about seasoning, like Zatarans and seasoning salt and the seasons.
So when you write, because that's a metaphor, that's association, right?
Exactly. Yeah, so it's metaphors and similes and these literary devices which are connecting these seemingly different things, like the seasons and winter. So in that poem, every season is represented. Spring, it springs up and giving fall on winter's bench and the summer's length that the blue jays fly for migration, things like that. But then I talk about seasoning and Thanksgiving because it was Thanksgiving I wrote the poem, and how it flavors us, this idea of aging us, and that
Yeah.
it takes time to make salt, it takes seasons to make something that has flavor, and things that are immediately coming at you with no time is bland. So that was like the idea I was trying to make with it. But it was just fun because this one did all just come out at once in like literally like 20 minutes, ironically.
Yeah, I have to
But
read it slowly as well. And we just want to make that point, right? This is why the arts
yes.
are so critical for everyone in
Mhm.
all fields, but especially for people in tech and in science, because it really strengthens a muscle that may have atrophied,
Mhm.
but your vision, your imagery, your association, your parallelism to right, your metaphorical ability to
Mhm.
parallel two stories at the same time, right?
Mhm.
And really, let's get to the science really quick. I did
Yes.
a quick just search of what does poetry do to the brain. It says poetry often employs figurative language, metaphor, rhetorical devices, requiring the brain to engage in a more abstract and nuanced mode of thinking than everyday language, right? Because your
Mhm.
mathematical languages, right? And your scientific languages, your code to fly your spacecraft,
Mhm.
and
Mhm.
everything. But poetry is another language, the right hemisphere. Of course, the whole we debunk the myth left and right creativity logic, but they're talking about some functions going on in the right hemisphere. So poetry, particularly the use of metaphor, activates the right hemisphere, which involves integrating and comprehending unrelated concepts, right?
Mhm.
So of course we'll
Yes.
have, but these are just some general things. It's just
You know,
reward and
you got
pleasure.
me thinking. You got me
What?
thinking now. So I love this because it
And
makes
then
me
you
think
talk
of
about,
like
uh-huh.
it makes me think of like programming language, and
Mhm.
how you have conditional statements, for instance, like if then.
Mhm.
So if this condition, do this, or you have loops where you say for, and it keeps going until a condition is met, and then it ends that loop. Things like that. And programmers, there are brute force ways, almost prose like ways, which prose is beautiful and it gets the job done.
Mhm.
Ways to get a program done, but then a programmer will come and do the same problem in a really elegant way using different logic, but it's so poetic how they use the same devices that someone else has, but did it in such a poetic way
Mhm.
that it uses less efficiency of the computer, or more efficiency in the computer to get the same job done than someone else that did the same problem, but it was like a million more lines, for instance. And they did it in like four, right?
Oh my,
And so, and that
that's
matters.
poetry, right?
Yeah, it is. It's the same thing. Because I think about what this engages, and it reminds
Mhm.
me of programming, and what I bet that the same parts of the brain are being engaged when a programmer is trying to write a program,
Mm.
as the same poet writing a poem. I bet that there are very, very similar things happening, because at the end of the day, it's state of the art, right?
Yeah.
It's all art, it's all poetry at the end of the day, in my opinion.
Yeah, and even,
Yeah.
I've been speaking for a while, and you've started your speaking career, and I'm so excited to see you you launch and get on these stages, right? But speaking, right, is an art, and how we start our speeches, because we can just go up there and do data, but I
Mhm.
poetically start my speeches, and then I do the wraparound
Mm,
where I end my speech with that same
mm,
concept I started with,
mm.
to kind of give
Full
the brain
circle.
closure. But
Mhm.
it's and that's why I love the fact that we had a mother that put us in the arts earlier on, because that's just the way our brains
Yes.
automatically think and automatically
Yes.
function through the resources and data. Wonderful. So
Shout out
definitely,
Gwendolyn Jefferson. Yes. Joy.
yes, well, so
Yes.
definitely so many areas. They talked about full body experiences, and I love the way you were
Mm,
in nature and you just did that. And they also talk about the poetry chill, right?
mhm,
Poetry induced chills.
mhm.
And yeah, so I just want thank you for doing this mini session podcast, long diamond mentor moment, and pearls of wisdom. But as we just, launch off, we just want to invite the listeners, who's ever listening, to really, if you have never done poetry or you've only did it in your elementary K-12 experience and you haven't done it as an adult, try it. What's just one first step that people can do just to get started on their poetic journey?
Yes, I love it. Please, we want to hear it.
No. Could you give a tip? I'm asking you, Joseph Jefferson.
I would say to start about what you feel about the world around you.
Mhm.
You can describe a scene that really is important to you, that has impacted you, or a topic that you know a lot about, that you love. But I think poetry springs naturally from the love that you have for the world. And as long as you have that centered, the poetry is going to flow out really beautifully in ways that you may not even imagine yourself. And so
that's good. Poetry and passion, right? Poetry and purpose, right?
Yes.
My tip for people just to get started is, first of all, have an open mind. You don't have to come on, live TV and share it. It's just you get a poetry book, get a book. It's just you and the book. You can share it if you wish. Understand that this just open. It doesn't have to rhyme. It doesn't have to be an AB format. It doesn't have to be 10 lines long. You can look at other examples of poetry just to get inspired, but no, you don't have to do exactly like them, and get into new areas. Sometimes just you being in a new environment can inspire your ability to observe at a deeper level and to be quiet, right?
Mm-hmm.
To be quiet. Yes. Awesome. So thank you so much. Continue sharing your poetry. May everyone you're working with at your organizations, your scientific organizations, but also their partnerships with the arts and your musical theater over at Caltech, may they continue doing great work and continue just being an advocate, showing people the importance of coupling and unifying business, leadership, the sciences, the education, right? The healthcare, all of these areas should be connected, and they should all sit on the arts and allowing us to build brain capital, which is brain skills and brain health. So thank you so much. Any last parting words?
Integrate more. Thank you for having me, and go poetry.
Go poetry. It is that. So my last note is, what will your verse be? What will your verse be?